The Philippines hopes to increase the share of renewable energy to 35% of the total energy mix by 2030. By 2040, the target is to improve that to 55%. The good news is that energy production from renewables increased from 60.8 gigawatts in 2008 to 106 gigawatts in 2019. The bad news is that the share of renewables over the same period fell from 33.9% to 20.8%. As you all know, clean energy is important to sustain economic growth, climate change mitigation, and even energy security. What legislations will you propose to accelerate the development of renewables so that they meet the national targets and lessen the share of fossil fuels, particularly coal, which accounts for 54% of the country's total energy mix?
For Mr. Ang's question, first to answer is Attorney Panelo, and then we will be moving to the left.
I'll be frank with you. Hindi ko po napag-aralan yung portion, yung parte niyan. Kaya hindi ako magpapanggap na alam ko ang kasagutan. Subalit, pag-aaralan ko po yan at titingnan ko kung ano ang makakabuti sa ating bansa regarding dyan sa renewable energy.
Thank you, Attorney. Very honest answer. Ms. Legarda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ang. We already have the 2008 Renewable Energy Law, and we must strictly implement it. There are many provisions which are just being implemented now. And why are we lowering the energy mix of renewables when we have a law that must be implemented? Why? Because perhaps there are provisions which are not yet being fully and effectively implemented. What we must do is the oversight function of the Renewable Energy Law as well as a Climate Change Act and the People's Survival Fund. These are laws already enacted by Congress. Happy to have principally authored these measures, and I would want the strict and effective implementation. The false dichotomy between sustainable development and natural resources, it's one or the other, hindi po totoo yan. That's why I will file the PENCAS bill, the Environment Natural Resources Accounting, so that our measurement of our GDP and our GNP is not just by the gains in terms of monetary value, but natural resources as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Legarda. Attorney Roque.
Ang usaping renewable po ay hindi lang usaping enerhiya. Ito po'y usaping buhay. Narating ko po yung mga iba't ibang lugar na nasalanta ng bagyong Odette at yung grabing danyos po na sinapit na ating mga kabataan, ating mga kababayan ay dahil po sa climate change na dulot nga po ng fuel emission. So I think our shift to renewable energy is a matter of life and death. Kaya nga po kung tayo magbibigyan ng pagkakataon, una-una, ibabalik po natin ang lahat ng feed-in tariffs, yung incentives para ang ating mga energy producers po ay mag-resort na or magpalit, pumunta sa renewables energy. At pangalawa, isa pang naiisip ko po, i-encourage po mga electric cooperatives na sila na po ang mag-generate ng kanilang kuryente using renewable, dahil pag ginawa mo po yan, bababa ang kuryente dahil mawawala po ang transmission charge, mawawala po yung charge kapag nasasayang po yung kuryente, mapapababa rin po ang presyo ng kuryente.
Thank you, Attorney Roque. Attorney Marcoleta.
Kailangan po ay mapalakas natin ang ating regulatory agency. The problem that I see now is that the ERC is not laying down the correct regulations in order to incentivize energies like solar, wind, and biomass. These are the things that we need to do. Also, we need to legislate certain measures in order to strengthen the powers of the DOE in order for us to influence the correct energy mix in this country, not dominated by coal, by maybe we can expand also some geothermal sources and others. This is the way this is the roadmap, and this is the way to go. Unless and until we are able to put some measures to strengthen the regulatory function of the ERC, we will not be going further in this case. Thank you.
Karen, please.
Yes.
Follow-up question lang kay Congressman Marcoleta. Meron tayong 4 na kasamahan doon sa mababang kapulungan. I think ang tawag sa kanila ay power block. Kung ano man ang mga house bills na pinafile doon ay pinipigil ata nila. No, I remember ang NEA administrator was kicked out because of corruption.
What is the question, sir?
So the question is this, no? Ano kayang magagandang magagawin doon para makalampas naman ang legislation sa kabutihan ng renewable energy? Kasi mayroong power block eh.
Ang importante po kasing nakikita ko, hindi lamang doon sa baba, kundi sa taas din. Kaya kailangan magkaroon din po ng mga fighters doon sa taas, sa Senado, sapagkat ang marami pong measures na ginagawa namin, nahantong lamang doon sa third and final reading. Wala naman pong masyadong napupunta sa taas, kaya hindi nabibigyan ng impetus yung nagagawa sa baba. So kailangan din po natin ang champion doon sa Senado para sa ganun ay magawa natin ang measures na kinakailangan para sa kapakanan ng bansa sa usaping enerhiya.
Maraming salamat po.
We'll resume back to Mr. Ang's question. Attorney Gadon.
Okay, ang question is how will you increase the source of energy? Alam niyo yung project na in-initiate ni Bongbong Marcos doon sa Ilocos Norte, yung windmill power source. Yan ang pinakamalaking windmill energy producer in Southeast Asia. So dapat kopyahin natin yon, ipalaganap natin yon. Pangalawa, yung i-improve natin yung mga water catchment system so that we can use the turbine technology. This is a very cheap cost of source of energy, yung turbines. And we should review the tariff, feed-in tariff being granted to those solar producers, solar energy producers. Sa sobrang baba ng binibigay sa kanilang feed-in tariff, wala nang gustong pumasok sa solar energy ng malawakan. So yun ang dapat gawin.
Attorney Olarte.
Ako po ang kasalukuyang presidente ng Clean Air Philippines Movement. Now, in order to utilize the best source of energy, kailangan po yung renewable sources. Now, hydropower po ang pinakamagandang source ng energy natin. Dito po sa Lanao del Norte, meron po tayong Maria Cristina Falls. If we can utilize the power of that Maria Cristina Falls to the maximum, no? Nanggagaling po ang water dyan sa Marawi City and papunta po dyan sa Iligan City. Maganda po if we can utilize that. Now also, aside from the hydropower sources, we can plant trees, greening of the countryside. We can plant langka, avocado, and itong kakao po. Yun ang magandang sources. It can clean the air and preserve water, which can be a good source of hydropower.
Mr. Albani.
In the name of God, the most compassionate and the most merciful. Tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, kailangan ibalik natin yung public facility sa sambayan ng Pilipino, meaning to the government. And we have to nationalize the public, especially the electric power sa bansa natin. But we should not rely on the fuel puzzle, meaning we have to adapt the clean renewable energy, hydroelectric, tulad ng nuclear, solar energy, windmill, and etc. So that the consumer makaranas naman sila ng mababang bayad, because the most expensive bayad dito sa Meralco, dito lang sa Pilipinas, sa buong mundo. So maranasan nila, and then they can also, ang ating mga factory sa bansa natin, magkaroon ng magandang manufacture that they can compete in the global order.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Albani. Attorney Espiritu.
We don't have a luxury of time. We don't have the luxury of time. We have until 2030 to reduce our carbon emissions and keep our temperature below 1.5 degrees. That's what scientists say. If we do not do that, that's already irreversible. Ibig sabihin, ang human race ay in danger of the worst extreme thing is extinction. Kapag tinawag nating irreversible yan, extinction. So kapag ganito, na meron pang energy mix, hindi tayo aabot sa target na ganyan. At yung 2030 na yan, na irreversible na ang damage sa atin, dahil nagkakaroon na tayo ng climate emergency, climate crisis, hindi tayo mabubuhay niyan. So dapat hindi energy mix. I-phase out ang mga coal-fired power plants at 100% renewable energy na dapat tayo.
Attorney Bailan.
Yes, sa tingin ko, meron na kasi tayong batas, renewable energy, pinoint out na po yan ni Congresswoman Lauren Legarda. Kailangan po nating reviewin yan. Pero ako po, parang gusto ko rin pukunin yung mga comprehensive land use program ng iba't ibang mga LGUs para malaman ano ba talaga yung mga resources na available dito sa mga clubs na ito. At i-compare ko rin po, kukunin ko rin po yung data po sa mga DFA, sa iba't ibang DFA para malaman po natin anong bansa ang pwede tayo makapag-tie up para ma-develop po natin yung energy. I remember, merong atang ginawang report si former Energy Secretary Jeronimo Velasco, bata pa po ako noon. Pero nung panahon po ni Presidente Marcos, merong po kinonduct silang study. I wanna get that study, find out ano ba nangyari. Kasi dati may biomass, geothermal, at ano pa. So kailangan po natin, binayaran po natin yung study na yan, di ba? So kailangan po, buklatin ulit natin, basahin natin, at ang basis natin yung renewable energy.
Thank you, Attorney Bailan. Mr. Balita.
Napakayaman natin sa renewable energy. Air, hydro, biogas, geothermal. Pero ang pinakamayaman tayo sa tao. We have to strengthen our educational system para mapalakas yung STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Bakit kanyo? Isa po tayo sa pinakamababa ang budget sa science and technology. Sir, meron pa po tayong time. Ma'am, meron pa tayong time. Because, if we can support our scientists, our researchers, our engineers, we may be able to be more self-sufficient in developing our human resource who will really be prime movers to the development of our renewable energy. I also would like to propose for incentives for social enterprises, okay, that will embrace green technology and clean energy use dahil tataas po ang demand in so doing. And we need a society through a massive campaign. And please, let's depoliticize energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Balita. And finally, Attorney Castriciones.
Alam niyo po, itong usapin tungkol sa renewable energy, meron na po tayong batas at ang kailangan po natin ay tamang implementasyon. Pero mas maganda po siguro kung amyendahan po natin ito para ma-enhance po natin yung paggamit ng renewable energy. Paano po? Sa pamamagitan po ng mga pagbibigay ng mga insentiba at saka yung mga tax cuts sa mga gustong sumabak po dito sa paggamit ng renewable energy. At siguro po, napakaganda po rin sigurong ipanawagan natin sa buong mundo, sa international community, itong carbon emission. Kasi ang carbon emission ng Pilipinas, mababa lamang kumpara sa mga first world countries na kung saan ay napakalakas ng kanilang carbon emission at ipinapas nilang obligasyon sa ating bansa. Anyway, wala naman po tayong magagawa doon kung hindi umangal at sabihin sa kanila na dapat ay obserbahan din nila ang carbon emission. Pangalawa, siguro kailangan po natin talaga na i-promote yung mga bagong teknolohiya katulad po nitong tinatawag na gamit ng electric cars. Marami po sa Pilipinas ang gumagamit po ng mga sasakyan na pinapaandar ng mga petrolyo. Siguro it's high time that we should adjust and make use of electric.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. It's a follow-up question. I think the point is that renewables have been increasing, except their share in the total energy mix is diminishing because of the faster growth of fossil fuels, particularly coal. So very few of you have actually mentioned actual legislation. I was wondering if those of you who've said that we need incentives, would you be specific in citing the laws that you would introduce that will address those incentives that you would like to see? Dr. Balita?
Yeah.
89% of our enterprises are micro-enterprises. And if they will be, I mentioned earlier about the creation of the Micro-Enterprise Commission, and that could include the incentivization of their clean energy user, and among others that we would like to incentivize is including social enterprises, which are marapat lang naman talagang bigyan sila ng incentives. And sir, I think the education that I also propose will also address that. When the EDCOM discovers the weakness of our STEM, that EDCOM will strengthen our STEM, our scientists and our engineers and the researchers.
Well, Dr. Benita, you mentioned earlier that you wanted some improvements in education.
Yes, sir.
The PIDS last year came up with a study warning that the interest among learners in STEM, this is in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is actually in decline.
Yes.
Fewer of them are interested in going to STEM. In fairness, the DOST mentioned that the opposite is actually true, but the DOST study will not be released until this year. So, given that you mentioned education is a solution, right? How do you address the declining interest in STEM among learners?
Actually, sir, it's not, STEM is not really the only pathway amongst the K-12 tracks.
No, for renewable energy.
For renewable energies is interest. The STEM is something we can improve through basic education, starting from elementary. We have to retain the teachers, get them more engaged. And, believe it or not, this pandemic accelerated our embrace of the digitalization and the Industry 4.0, which I think will change the landscape of how STEM is taken by our learners, sir. I have very high hopes that the accelerated Industry 4.0 in education is going to help.
This one is for Attorney Espiritu. You said you wanted to get rid of all fossil fuel plants and go 100% renewables.
Yes.
But the problem, according to some experts, is the base load issue. How would you address the base load? Because, of course, solar panels can generate without the sun, and wind farms cannot generate without wind. So how do you address that particular concern?
Firstly, meron namang may tamang framework ang ating batas na idalhin mismo sa household ang paglagay ng pag-operate ng mga renewable energy systems like solar. And I think kapag ginawa natin yon, dinala natin sa komunidad, and the communities operate these renewable energy systems, that will solve the problem of baseload, that will also solve the problem ng cost ng kuryente. In fact, kikita pa nga ang household dahil kapag sila ay nagpo-produce, ibebenta nila sa distribution utility para mapakinabangan ng iba.
So what laws will you introduce?
Then we should strengthen laws or even create laws that will promote renewable energy down to the community and support these communities. There was a mention about incentives. We should incentivize these communities in order to adopt renewable energy systems and do not. We no longer have to rely on billionaire power producers in the industry.
Secretary.
Sir. Yes. Well, I propose po what I would refer to as a Climate Change Mitigation Act. Unang-una po, bibigyan natin ng panahon ang lahat ng coal plants na mag-convert siguro po sa LNG. Dahil ang katotohanan po, hindi po magiging sapat ang renewable para doon sa base load na sinasabi natin. Pero naniniwala po ako na LNG is the cleanest fossil fuel and we should use LNG for base load but still encourage renewable. Pangalawa po, ibabalik po talaga natin yung feed-in tariffs. Hindi po talaga magkakaroon ng incentives ang solar kung hindi mababalik ang feed-in tariffs.
Deputy Speaker.
Thank you.
Mahirap po kasi na walang incentive yung ating mga...
Sorry, there are two deputy speakers. Go ahead, sir. I'll go to you afterwards.
Are you asking the senator, sir?
Go ahead, sir, since you started.
Okay, yung po kasing renewable energy, this is the most prohibitive source of energy. Alam naman natin yun. That is why I said, let us incentivize them by way of strengthening the regulatory function of the ERC. Sa ngayon po kasi, kung alam natin na mayroong cap sa kanila 100 kilowatts lamang. Sa mga tweed, nadi-discourage sila to produce more sapagkat hindi na mabibili sa grid. Kaya kailangan pong alisin yung cap na yon at pagkatapos, para ma-incentivize sila, bigyan natin ng tax credits lahat po yung susuong dito sa renewable energy para sila ay mabigyan ng pag-asang magkaroon ng marami pang planta.
Deputy Speaker Lauren.
Thank you. The Department of Energy has recently, just last year, already put a cap on greenfield coal projects, and that's a welcome development, and we must all support that. Second, baseload can be provided by renewable energy because it is nothing new. We already have battery, not just from Elon Musk, but even in other countries, not just Tesla. In fact, but it would be self-serving because I must be transparent. My son is in renewables, so I know that there is baseload, there is battery, and we must encourage even electric cooperatives to source clean energy, renewable energy in their jurisdictions so that transmission will be less.
We're past the time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But it's possible.
Okay, thank you. A few of you have mentioned incentivizing the development of windmills, solar, even hydro. The problem, according to some critics, is that even renewables are not entirely clean. I mean, even the construction of wind farms is not necessarily zero carbon. So they suggest instead that there should be a program to lessen consumption. Would there be any laws in your mind that would address that issue of incentivizing the reduction of consumption?
Consumption?
Yes. Because you don't want to go from one race to perdition, using fossil fuels, to another race to perdition using renewables. So some are suggesting that the better way would be to encourage people to consume less. Yes, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. May I cite the proposed legislation which my esteemed colleagues could probably support, and this is the ban on single-use plastic, because by year 2040 or 50, we will have more plastic than fish in our oceans if we continue the business as usual scenario. Second, we have a pending legislation on the circular economy so that the producers will be responsible for what they produce in terms of waste that they produce, and the extended producer's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Legarda.
Secretary.
I think we could explore the possibility of granting more discounts to households that use less electricity, because you're correct. For as long as consumption increases, we will run out of sources of energy. And that is partially done now by way of subsidizing the poor during the time of pandemic, when we actually did not charge households if their consumptions are very low.
Second, Attorney.
Yeah, probably. I think, of course, daylight saving time, we have used that before. I think we can also use it again. Secondly, daylight saving time, and then lost my...
Attorney, you also mentioned that
work from home, because right now we know that we can work from home, so we will be saving on transportation, we'll be saving on electricity. So I think we need to work with the civil service to find out what work that we can encourage, so that some people need not go to a faraway place to work.
Attorney, I was going to say earlier that you had suggested that we review our land use policies as well.
Yes.
I guess you were referring to solar development, but one of the criticisms of solar development is that it takes away land space from agriculture. So would you care to comment on that?
As I mentioned, the comprehensive land use program, depending on the topography of the LGU, we will know what will be the most useful energy that will be used there. For example, in a mountain, it will take some time for Napocor to build those electric poles, right? So we need solar energy for that one. So that's what I was saying. We have to review the land use of that particular area.
Final follow-up question. Secretary Roque, you brought up LNG as another source of fuel. nuclear power is not renewable, but it's been discussed as part of the energy mix. I think the Department of Energy had also included that as a recommendation to be part of the energy mix. Would any of you care to share your position on the development of nuclear power?
Well, we should explore that, pero tutol po ako sa Bataan Nuclear Power Plant dahil ako po ay taga-Bataan at meron pong fault line sa aming probinsya at meron pong bulkan na pinatubo na malapit sa Bataan Nuclear Power Plant at yan po ang dahilan kung bakit sa tingin ko kung tayo magnu-nuclear, wag naman po doon sa Bataan.
Not in your backyard.
Not in our backyard.
Anybody else? Secretary?
Marami po sa ating mga karatig bansa ang gumagamit po ng nuclear energy. And I think ang presyo po ng elektrisidad sa kanila ay napakababa at napakamura. Tayo po sa Pilipinas, napakataas. Pero dahil po sa takot natin tungkol po sa tinatawag na epekto ng nuclear, ay kung minsan ay nakakaligtaan po natin na ito ay isang makabagong teknolohiya. Siguro pwede natin itong ilagay sa mga islands na kung saan ay hindi pwedeng maapektuhan ang maraming populasyon para po magkaroon po tayo ng mas mababang presyo po ng itong elektrisidad.
Doctor?
I am in favor with the use of nuclear power plants as sources of renewable energy. If we use nuclear power plants safely and put them in places where they are acceptable, then there will be lower cost of fuels, and also further there will be lower quantity reducing the use of non-renewable sources of energy.
Attorney Gadon, you were going to say something?
South Korea installed the same model of our Bataan nuclear plant. Look at Korea now, South Korea. They sell cars, heavy equipments, cell phones, appliances, and they have invaded the whole, the global market. And that's why they are very successful. Now, kung ibabawal natin yung Bataan nuclear plant, dapat buhayin uli yan. And not only that, yung solar energy kasi, nung panahon ni Noynoy Aquino.
Attorney Gadon, time's up.
Mr. Spiritu.
Yes, I don't agree that nuclear energy should be classified as renewable energy.
It's not.
Yes. Tandaan natin na kaya tayo mag-a-adapt ng renewable energy dahil sa ating climate crisis, climate emergency. Hindi naman siguro kaiba sa atin ang mga nangyari sa Chernobyl na nakapagsira ng ating environment, nakapagsira ng ating climate. Kaya hindi ako papayag dyan sa nuclear energy niyan.
Well, you're advocating solar development, but the share of solar power in the energy mix, according to the National Renewable Energy Program, is a mere 1.2% as of 2019.
Yes, that's why our solution would be to bring solar energy down to the household. Meron tayong batas na nag-aalaw per household mangungutang ka sa Pag-ibig para maglagay ka ng solar panel sa iyong bahay. And in fact, we have zero metering, right? So that the household, kapag nag-produce siya ng energy more sa kinukonsume niya, pwede niyang ibenta sa Meralco at kikita pa siya. Therefore, palaganapin natin yan para masolve natin ang problema ng energy mix, yung share ng solar sa ating energy mix. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Karen, meron akong follow-up kay Attorney Spiritu.
Okay.
Pinag-usapan kasi yung mix kanina eh. No? Yung original question ni Blink was on the mix that should be offered by the DU to the consumers.
Yes.
Okay? But would you consider having 2 DUs or more in a particular franchise area competing with each other? Whether they are ECs or PDUs?
What I'm talking about is you will actually be independent already of the transmission system. In fact, you could contribute if you put solar panels down to the household level and empower communities in order to provide for their own energy needs. Yan ay magiging autonomous na sila na nagpo-produce ng kanilang enerhiya. In fact, makakapag-contribute pa sila sa national grid doon sa mga hindi nila nauubos.
So sinasabi niyo yung consumers can can produce their own power.
Yes.
Parang yun ata yung solar ng bayan franchise.
Yes.
Ni Senadora Ligarda.
In fact, our office, the Bukluran ng Manggagawang Pilipino office, has installed solar panel sa aming office. And we will go for zero metering. And later on, we could even contribute to the national grid.
Before Attorney Suplico's follow-up question, Attorney Gadon and Attorney Marcoleta raised their hands. Attorney Gadon?
Yung kasing solar energy, maganda sana yan eh. Pero kagaya nga ng sinabi mo, Mr. Danteang, na 1% na lang ang share ng solar energy.
The efficiency is about 10%.
Yes. You know why? Because the service contracts were awarded to companies that do not have capacity to put up. Binigay kasi dun sa mga malakas lang eh. And then they were not able to produce the projects, no? At siyempre nagkaroon din ng period ng implementation.
Thank you, Attorney Gadon. Sorry, the time's very limited. Attorney Marcoleta.
Yan po kasing solar on household level is easier said than done. Sapagkat ito po ay napakataas ang presyo kapag ka ikaw ay gumawa niyan. Ang importante i-consider po natin seriously yung ating nuclear plant sapagkat napakamura po talaga ng kuryenteng makukuha natin dito. Iwasan natin maging emotional at political sa issue ito sapagkat kailangan natin talaga ang isang mabuting source ng energy para sa ganon ay abot kaya po lahat ng mamamayan ang elektrisidad na may dudulot natin sa kanila.
Thank you.
I want to interpolate.
We have candidates raising their hand. Mr. Balita and Attorney Bailan.
Yeah, na-mention ko po kanina yung mga enterprises that could be incentivized for using renewable energy. Huwag po natin kalimutan ang government offices ay isang napakalaking consumer ng energy. If we can start with them and invest in them, then probably we can set the example by doing that. And also, I think this has to be a whole of society approach, and this is where education will come in very handy. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Bailan.
I was in college when the Bataan nuclear power plant was a hot topic and it was mothballed. But when I worked in DBM and I had access to more information, I learned that the government spent billions to acquire this kind of energy. And when the fault line was discovered, I think then President Marcos added another 1 billion to make it more secure because it is cheaper. So I think it's about time that we tap the PNRI, Nuclear Research Institute, to give us expert opinion on this one.
Thank you, Attorney Bailan. And finally, we have Attorney Castersones raising his hand.
Yes, I would just like to respond and probably to support the position taken by Attorney Bailan when it comes to the National Land Use Act, because, you know, we have a lot of good ideas when it comes to a renewable source of energy, but the departments of our government are not in line with the so-called projects and programs. Like, for example, the program of Senator Ligarda for solar energy, it took years before it was approved because the different departments and agencies do not really cooperate with the so-called system that would have to really support this renewable energy.
Thank you, Attorney Castersones. Professor Carlos?
Yes, not to rain on the parade of everybody with, all our heroic measures to migrate to renewable energy. Also, with all due respect to Klink here. The empirical evidence tells us that on the ground, 67% of energy use is still fossil fuel, and therefore, in the foreseeable future, it will be like that. So, just to think about it, it's not a question. But now that Dr. Balita has raised the issue of government being one of the biggest consumers of energy, if you become senator, are you going to continue the building of that ugly building at, where is that, BGC, with no windows? Isn't that a huge energy consumption? That ugly big building which looks like an egg, which will be your future home?
The Senate. The Senate.
The Senate building. Diba? I think it's cost a lot of zeros.
That's why I think government should really give us the best example of what we're talking. It's not about imposing it on us or on the private sector, but I think the government should really take the lead. And that's why even my answer to the Senate job description is related to it. Let's walk our talk and let's start with government. And that will have a sizable value to what we're talking about. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but maybe Senator Legarda can answer that if the building of that ugly building can still be aborted or what? The boat has sailed.
Professor Clarita Carlos, I must say that I was in the Senate when that was discussed, and there was a presentation of several architectural firms. I'm not privy to that. I was not in the committee that selected it. It has already been funded for 1 or 2 years. I'm not certain if the funding of the construction of the building is still ongoing, so we leave it at that.
Which means it cannot be aborted.
It would be a white elephant because it's been funded for 1 or 2 years, if I am not mistaken.
Wow.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Yun po ang pagkakaalam ko dahil wala na po ako sa Senado ng 3 taon.
Yeah. Can you all please do something about that ugly building without windows?
Ma'am, we will, but we need your help to get there first.
You have to get there first.
Ma'am.
Okay. Final comment from Attorney Alorte.
Well, if the building really is one that is disadvantageous to the to the public and to the government, we must do something. We should abort it. I will propose the abortion, stoppage of this building, which you said is not good for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Supposedly.
Thank you. That was a very interesting question by Mr. Dante Ang that really spun off to so many different questions.